It's What's Up Now, back again with our special guest,
Eddie Seay.
and we're going to talk about voting.
Yes. And other issues.
Yes, lots of issues.
Yes, definitely.
Now, your organization is Your Vote is Your Voice.
Yes.
So remember, everybody can make a change, but not if you don't get out and vote. And we're having a lot of trouble getting the millennials to realize that they can affect a change, but they have to get out and vote.
And get involved.
Yes.
I think there's two components to, when we talk about voting. One of the issues that's really important to me is the fact that many times we might vote for a particular candidate, and we're coming up on an election where lots of people vote. Presidential elections are, tend to attract people. But once that election's over, we forget that there's other ways that we need to be involved. What happens when our candidate doesn't win the election? What happens when our candidate does win the election? How do we hold those candidates to their feet to the fire?
How do we get the change that we want?
Yes, and I think that sometimes we forget that, or not forget, but our thought process says that, we voted today and that's all that we need to do.
I think we get a little complacent.
Yeah, and I think that, there's so many things out there in the community that we need, but candidates sometimes pull away from those things because many times they're hot button issues that require us to spend money or that affect a certain group of people. And so, they take the easy road out many times, and we don't hold them responsible for those kinds of decisions. So, the voting process, of course, is very important to what we do, but that second component of just getting involved in the community and working together at many different levels, whether it's at here in our Franklin County and Rocky Mount, whether it's at the state level, or whether it's at the national level. There's so many ways to get involved.
And just because our candidate doesn't win doesn't mean that you give up for the next 4 or 8 years.
That's right.
You can still have your voice heard.
This kind of work is not easy. No, I would never tell someone that it's easy work, but it's work that makes you feel good about about what you're doing. It is probably one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, but as I said, it makes me feel good about the opportunity to effect change. It doesn't happen overnight many times. If you look at many of the issues that, some of the social issues especially, that we've dealt with in the past few years, there has been change, but we're not totally where we need to be yet. And so it's a process that happens sometimes with baby steps. And eventually, look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Oh yeah.
We're still dealing with many of the issues around that law, even though it's a law. Many times, and I look back in the 60s and saw the deaths and violence, not violence that was not necessary either. It was necessary to win the right to vote for a specific group of people, and really for everybody in this country. We should have enough respect at least for that, and get out and use our voice in respect to those people that died.
A lot of our millennials don't know about those struggles.
That's right.
They came into a fairly calm political climate, and they don't understand what you and I and people of our generation actually fought for.
Sure.
I mean, high pressure water hoses and being jailed, and it was a big struggle, and I don't want the millennials to kind of brush all that under the rug, because it's not as fraught as it was before.
Right. I mean, certainly we're not having to deal with those issues in the way that we had to in the 60s. And, I would like to think that had I been at the age of making decisions, I would have been out there fighting for those issues. Just like, thinking about the movie Selma. One of the things that really spoke to me about from that movie, was the walk across the bridge there. And the violence that took place as a result of just people walking across a bridge to get the right to vote. How many times do we have that excitement, that determination to win
That
an
depth.
issue, that depth? Yeah, we just don't experience that today.
Yeah.
I went to a couple of weeks ago an uprising, or if you can call it an uprising, but the Democracy Spring. And it was all about bringing our rights back down to a level where we are the owners of what goes on in this country.
We actually have the reins in our hands instead
Yes.
of letting somebody else speak for us.
Right, and so we had thousands of people there in D.C., talking about campaign finance and all of those kinds of issues that keep us from really speaking the voice in the way that we should be able to. But, that's the closest I've seen really lately where we've come to an experience where people are actually saying, hey, we've had enough.
Mhm.
We want to go, we are this country, not these politicians.
I think we've gotten away from that, especially the millennials.
Yes.
Because they're so used to having everything instant.
Mm-hmm.
You go on Facebook, you can talk to all your friends.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to anybody anywhere in the world on your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
But to realize you have to slog through the political
Mhm.
change is difficult for them to fathom.
Very much so.
And I think that's one reason they give up.
Yeah, and I think that we talk about millennials, and the reason we need to talk about millennials really is that they are the biggest age group out there
Definitely.
that's really not politically and socially involved in change, at least as far as that population goes, that constituency. However, it's also going on in other groups too, where people are just apathetic
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. And so, we tend to talk about millennials more because there's such a huge number there, based on, what all the babies that were born as a result of the baby boomers
Mhm.
and all that. But, we have to realize the fact that it's not just millennials.
That's true.
It is many more people that are just not engaged. Now, how do we get them engaged? I think that's the issue. How do we offer to people a choice when it comes to going to the ballot box?
Mm-hmm.
How do we hold those politicians' feet to the fire? How do we engage in that process? And I think, unfortunately, we have to take this a few steps at a time. We have to get out there and get as many people knocking on doors and making phone calls and doing political rallies as we possibly can.
Minding websites.
Yeah, minding websites, speaking out in any way that you can to get people to realize that, hey, I have an opinion about this and I want to express it. Many times, we don't like that because it's not what our opinion is.
Mm-hmm.
But when we bring people together and have them talk and have them converse, then hopefully we come out with something that
It's good for everybody.
is good for everybody. Yes.
And it can be something as little as getting somebody to the place of voting.
Yes.
Because we had some of our elders in the last vote that they couldn't get there. They
Exactly.
just simply could not get there.
Mhm.
And so we're calling around and trying to get people, pick them up, take them to the polls.
Yeah, and one of our goals, and this is kind of interesting, we're building an app right now where a person can just, who's a member of your voice or who, has joined us, they just click on that app and it takes them to a ride to the polls, it takes them to a voter registration app, it takes them to many different things that gives them an opportunity to be a part.
And see,
and to-
just because we're old, that doesn't mean we can't use the technology.
That's right. There's many things out there. And so we're working on those things too, to make this organization really appeal to many different people,
Mhm.
not just millennials. So it's exciting. At the same time, it's frustrating.
How would you give me a few sentences on what your organization's goal is?
Well, our goal, first of all, our goal is to increase awareness. And so how do you increase awareness? You know, you do that in many different ways, things that we've talked about earlier. But number one is to increase awareness. Number two is to register as many voters as possible. And once we get those people registered, is to engage them in the voting process. So that's our third goal, to make sure that we're following up with them, to make sure that we're letting them know, hey, this election's coming up, because you'll be surprised about it, the number of people that just don't know there's an election coming up. Because in the state of Virginia and the Commonwealth of Virginia, there's an election every year, and people get accustomed
Because
to it. And so
I've actually had people say, oh, well,
Is there an
I
election?
voted a couple of months ago, what do you mean?
Yeah, and
They-
many
they just
times,
don't know.
there's many elections during that year, like we've got an election coming up with municipalities on May 3rd. And many people are unaware of that, so in getting them out to the polls to vote is another responsibility that we have. And so that takes people in our office, calling people and say, did you know there's an election coming up? And these are the candidates that are running. Have you decided to vote? Not telling them who to vote for, but making sure that they are aware of who the candidates are, what they stand for, and letting them make that decision.
Because I think one of the worst things you can do is get to the polls and have everybody jumping on you as you're trying to get in the building.
Exactly.
You can't make up your mind. It's just overwhelming.
Exactly. And so our fourth goal is to create focus groups across the state with many different constituency groups, determining, you know, what's important to them. How do we meet those needs across the community? So, you know, I think those are the four most important things that we do in Your Vote, Your Voice. You know, it's not all about voter registration.
And this is Your Vote is Your Voice. There's a Facebook page.
Yes, and an upcoming webpage also, which we'll
And an app.
announce.
An app is coming out.
Yes, an app to vote, an app to get a ride to the polls, an app to just get involved in your community and with suggestions that might be appropriate for you.
So go look it up and find out what you can do to help your community and how you can help get out the vote.
Yeah, and if you're looking at us up on Facebook, it's Your Vote, Your Voice.
Thank you very much.
It was awesome. Thank you guys so much.